so I want to get into this counter argument because, look, I will stake my position out right now. I really have zero problem with Scott Laughton still being around. I do not think it is this horrible betrayal of the rebuild that he is still around. And I think that, truthfully, a lot of the very online-driven desire to make Laughton out to be like, the fact they have Laughton is a disgrace and it's why everything isn't going the way we want it to. A lot of it's driven by those rumors that came out last summer about, well, you can get a first-round pick for him. And suddenly it became, well, how can you not trade Laughton if you can't get a first round, if you could get a first-round pick back for him? We take those rumors out of the equation. I don't think people are as adamant that Laughton has to be traded. I'd be totally fine if he spends the rest of his contract with Flyers. I don't really care. I think there's value in him being here. I think he's a perfectly fine player. I think he is important to that locker room in a lot of ways that we don't see, and I would have no problem with him keeping. But here's the counter argument, and this is, in my opinion, as much as I have zero problem with them keeping Scott Laughton, here's the counter argument for why keeping Scott Laughton can be frustrating to a lot of people. Garnet Hathaway, Nicholas Deslauriers, Eric Johnson, Nick Seeler. These are all guys who have been justified. Their continued presence on the roster has been justified because of the culture. Now, some of these guys are good. Garnet Hathaway is a legitimately good fourth-line winger. Nick Seeler is a legitimately good, I would say, bottom half of the lineup defenseman. I think you could put him anywhere from 4 to 6, and he will be a very, very solid defenseman. Yep. He will provide significant positive value. These are good players. However, that's a lot of players that are on this team in large part because of the culture. And I totally understand why people look at this roster and say, just how many of these guys do you freaking need? I get it.
And my thing has been, if we need certain dudes, a number of certain dudes to maintain this culture, you don't have a culture. You just have a couple of guys keeping everyone in line while the coach freaks out at everybody.
I guess maybe that is a culture.
I guess. But I just look at, I look at what the Blackhawks did in the 2010s and how they had to, yes, there were core pieces that they never let go. But after that first cup, and they ran into serious cap problems and had to move on from a number of players, Dustin Byfuglien, Chris Versteeg, Brian Campbell, a whole bunch of guys. They reloaded and won 2 more cups. Moving on from all these players. We have seen it with Tampa over the years. Now, granted, have leading up to and following the cups, they didn't have that same success, but if they had, they'd won 6 straight cups. But a great team for a long time, they lose pieces, and then they find a way to replace those pieces. They're not, oh, well, we have to have fucking Corey Perry and Pat Maroon. Without those 2 guys, what are we? No, they just figure it out.
Yeah.
Luke Shen leaves, and it's, oh, what are we going to do without Luke Shen? No, you figure it out. I just don't, if the culture is unsustainable without these players, you do not have a culture. You just have a couple of good leaders. Dudes who know how to deal with the coach and deal with young guys. That's it.
I think here's my issue with the sheer number of players that they have, and they justify by basically look how good they are in the room, look how good they are for the culture. I think that there are some guys, Laughton, I do believe is one of them, where Scott Laughton is actually an integral part of the social environment of the Flyers. I've made the case, and I truly believe this, I do not think that Owen Tippett would be the player he is today if he does not go into a Scott Laughton-driven locker room. Because Owen Tippett is a shy guy who is not a traditional macho-type hockey player, and there are some rooms that he could have gone into after kind of flopping, after being a high draft pick and going to a new place, where that personality would not have been embraced the way it was with the Flyers. And I think that's in large part because Scott Laughton fosters the kind of culture in that room that makes it so nah, we're all brothers. And just because you're quiet and shy doesn't mean you're weird. It means that you are just quiet and shy. And we're going to make sure you feel like you belong at all times. I think Scott Laughton is a big part of why Owen Tippett became more comfortable and became a legitimately good top 6 NHL forward. I think Scott Laughton's having a real impact there. However, there are other guys on this team that I think are here that they maybe say they're here for the culture, but they're really here because they just like having them. Like Nick Delorier is, in my opinion, not really having that big of an impact. It's just that this organization likes to have a dude who can beat the shit out of people.
Yes.
It's not even like, is it partially for the fans? Like, you love the fights.
Yeah.
It's fun.
No, it's for me.
But it's also because it makes the guys at the top of this organization just feel all warm and fuzzy inside that they have a tough guy. And
Delorier led the league in fights. They like that.
They like that. And it's not, yes, they're going to say that he's great for the culture and he's a great locker room guy. And you know what? He is. I have interviewed Nick Delorier a bunch of times. I've seen him interact with players. He's a great dude. Nothing bad to say about Nick Delorier. I do not think the culture would fall apart if Nick Delorier wasn't in it. But they like having a fighter. And same thing with Garnet Hathaway. And I think Garnet Hathaway is a really good player. He's a really good fourth liner, probably one of the better fourth liners in hockey, pure fourth liners, in my opinion. But I don't think they re-signed him because he's integral to the culture. I think they re-signed him because it makes them feel good to have a Garnet Hathaway on their team, because he's fun to watch and because he fits the idea of what they want a Flyer to be.
Flyers hockey.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't know if those guys are necessary. In the same way that I do think Laughton, like, it's almost like a boy who cried wolf thing. Like, how many times can you say this guy can't be traded for the good of the culture until a guy who's actually legitimately integral to the culture comes up and you're like, well, you've been selling us this for like 5 other guys. Why the fuck do you also need Scott Laughton? So I get it.
Like, there always has to be, we used to have the conversation about input and output. You can be a great locker room guy. At the end of the day, you need to be good at hockey.
Yeah.
Like, Scott Laughton is very good at hockey. He's not a top of the lineup guy, but he's a good hockey player. So it makes sense to have a guy like that. But then when you start to get lower in the lineup, it's like, couldn't we just have someone who's better?
Yeah, like how many do we actually
Wouldn't a better
need?
player result in more wins than having Delorier? Like,
and again, does it actually matter in the grand scheme of things, especially given the fact that they're not trying to compete? No. It's not the end of the world that Nick Delorier is on the roster, especially if he's not playing much, especially because he probably does make the young guys feel a little bit better about trying the Michigan because Nick Delorier is sitting on the bench or they can bring him in for the next game, whatever. It doesn't matter that much. But I understand why fans are like, how many friggin' players do you have to sell me that the main reason why they're here is the culture? Like, I get why it gets exhausting because, again, it becomes a boy cried wolf thing, and it would almost be better if they were just honest and were like, not like, we just like having the toughest guy in the league. Like, this is the Flyers. We're always going to have the toughest guy in the league. Maybe he's only going to play 25 games, but it just makes us feel better that we have a badass face puncher.
absolutely.
That would probably be more honest than me. Like, nah, if we lost him, the locker room just would not be the same.
We all silly like the mayor.